April 15th, 1932. Warsaw, Poland. The streets were wet with the early spring drizzle, reflecting the dim light of gas lamps as Marian Rejewski cycled hurriedly toward the Polish Cipher Bureau's offices at Frascati Palace. In his satchel lay notebooks filled with complex equations, sketches of gears and rotors, and pages of permutations that would soon make history. Rejewski's mind raced faster than his legs, calculating in abstract dimensions the patterns and possibilities of a machine the world considered unbreakable, the German Enigma. Inside the bureau, the air was thick with the scent of ink and paper. Cryptographers bent over tables cluttered with intercepted messages, listening intently as radio operators delivered the latest strings of encrypted German communications. Lieutenant Colonel Guido Lange, head of the Cipher Bureau, observed Rejewski's approach with cautious optimism. He had heard of the young mathematician's insights, the way Rejewski approached problems not as puzzles to be brute-forced, but as systems to be understood mathematically. Perhaps, Lange thought, this is the mind that can finally touch the unthinkable. Rejewski removed his raincoat and set down his bag. His eyes were already scanning the intercepted messages for repeating patterns. The Germans, confident in the mechanical precision of Enigma, did not realize that every operational quirk, the repeated use of predictable phrases, the limited ways operators started their messages, was a chink in their armor. Rejewski's genius lay not just in mathematics, but in his intuition, in his ability to see order in apparent chaos. For months, he had been experimenting with permutations and rotor settings, considering each mechanical interaction as a function, each plugboard swap as a variable. His colleagues, Jerzy Różycki and Henryk Zygalski, watched with awe as Rejewski began to reduce the complexity of Enigma from what seemed an insurmountable billions of possibilities to a solvable, structured problem. The first breakthrough came quietly, a realization that the initial double-letter indicators in German messages could be analyzed to deduce rotor wirings. It was elegant, counterintuitive, and completely unprecedented. "Marian," Zygalski whispered during a late-night session, "if what you're saying is correct, we may actually read their messages months before anyone expects." Rejewski's face remained impassive, his eyes scanning the patterns of letters flowing across the page. "We can," he said simply, "but only if we are methodical. Every message is a clue, every operator a predictable variable. The machine is a system. Systems can be solved." By midsummer, the team had constructed the first mathematical solution to Enigma, using permutation theory and insights drawn from the patterns of German communications. Rejewski developed the concept of the card catalogue, an early analogue of the methods that would later evolve into the Bletchley Park bomb. It was rudimentary by future standards, but at the time it was revolutionary. Poland, a nation sandwiched between aggressive neighbours, now possessed a key that could penetrate what Hitler's generals considered impenetrable. Rejewski's work extended beyond theory. He meticulously built replicas of Enigma machines, experimenting with wiring, rotor movement, and plugboard permutations. Every calculation was verified with mechanical tests, confirming that the mathematical insights could be translated into tangible decryption tools. The three cryptologists, Rejewski, Zygalski, and Różycki, worked in a relentless cycle of analysis, testing, and refinement. Their small Warsaw office became a laboratory of ingenuity, where mathematics met mechanical engineering under the shadow of an impending global conflict. As fall approached, the first decrypted messages flowed across the desks of Lange and his senior officers. Orders from Berlin, patrol instructions for the German army, and logistical directives that once seemed sealed behind unbreakable encryption now appeared in plain text. The implications were staggering. Poland had, against all expectations, solved the Enigma cipher years before the British would scale the effort at Bletchley Park. Yet Rejewski understood that this was only the beginning. Breaking Enigma required not just mathematical brilliance, but constant vigilance. German operational procedures evolved, operators introduced new practices, and the rotors themselves were periodically changed. Rejewski and his colleagues adapted with equal agility, developing new methods, Zygalski sheets, and permutation analysis techniques that could keep pace with the German adjustments. Their work was tireless, unglamorous, and critical, a silent war of intellect waged in quiet rooms in Warsaw, against the backdrop of rising threats from Nazi Germany. By the winter of 1932, the Cipher Bureau had a functioning system to intercept and decode German military communications, and the young cryptologists had earned the trust and admiration of their superiors. Rejewski, with his uncanny ability to reduce impossibly complex mechanical systems to solvable mathematical problems, had achieved what many considered impossible. He had not only cracked Enigma, but had laid the foundation for Allied successes that would resonate across Europe years later. Spring 1933, Warsaw, Poland. The city hummed with the quiet tension of a nation bracing for an uncertain future. Across the streets, soldiers drilled in squares, while political debates raged in government chambers. In the modest office of the Cipher Bureau, Marian Rejewski sat at his desk surrounded by a growing collection of Enigma replicas, each machine meticulously reconstructed to match the configurations used by the German military. His eyes were tired but focused, scanning telegrams and radio intercepts with relentless intensity. The stakes had escalated. Germany, under Hitler, was ramping up its military preparations, and every new message from Berlin carried the potential to reveal plans that could alter the course of history. Rejewski understood that every delay in deciphering these messages could cost lives. Each morning, he and his colleagues, Zygalski and Różycki, convened to discuss patterns, permutations, and anomalies in the intercepted transmissions. The work was exacting. A single miscalculation could nullify weeks of effort. The challenge intensified in mid-1933, when German operators began introducing new procedures. Rotors were reordered, plugboard settings were changed more frequently, and the stereotyped openings that had initially helped the Polish cryptologists were increasingly altered. Yet Rejewski adapted. Using advanced permutation theory, he developed methods to account for rotor positions and plugboard swaps simultaneously, dramatically reducing the number of possible Enigma settings to a manageable number for systematic testing. One cold evening, as the first snows dusted Warsaw's streets, Rejewski worked alongside Zygalski, who was laboriously preparing perforated sheets that would become known as Zygalski sheets. These sheets allowed the team to cross-reference rotor positions against known patterns in message keys, a technique that effectively automated part of the decryption process. It's like mapping the German mind, Rejewski mused quietly. Finding order where they believe there is none. The physical strain was matched by psychological pressure. Intercepts came in continuously, and German cipher changes threatened to outpace the team's ability to adapt. Rejewski's health, already fragile, began to show signs of wear, yet he persisted, driven by a sense of duty to his country and the knowledge that their work was the first line of defense against the growing German threat. Late nights blurred into early mornings, the office lit by flickering oil lamps, filled with the scratch of pencils on paper and the whir of rudimentary machines. Despite the immense workload, the first tangible successes were emerging. The team was able to read entire operational messages, tracking troop movements, supply shipments, and training exercises. Each breakthrough reinforced the idea that mathematics and logic could outwit the most complex mechanical encryption. Lieutenant Colonel Langer, observing the progress, realized that Poland now possessed a unique strategic advantage. For the first time, they could anticipate German maneuvers, not by guesswork or espionage, but by pure intellectual mastery. But the race against time was unrelenting. By 1934, the Germans had introduced a fourth rotor and additional security measures, forcing Rejewski and his team to devise even more sophisticated techniques. They developed the concept of card catalogues, comprehensive tables linking possible rotor and plugboard settings to message keys, which allowed for rapid elimination of impossible combinations. Each innovation was a response to German adaptations, a continuous cycle of challenge and solution. The intensity of the work was compounded by the geopolitical realities. Poland faced threats from both the West and the East, and military intelligence was crucial for national survival. Rejewski often contemplated the stakes. Every decoded message could inform military decisions, save lives, and potentially alter the balance of power in Europe. Yet, he worked quietly, without fanfare, knowing that the impact of his work would be largely invisible to the world outside the office. By the summer of 1935, Rejewski's methods had matured into a robust system capable of reliably breaking Enigma messages. The combination of permutation theory, Zygalski sheets, and carefully constructed mechanical replicas gave the Poles a consistent edge. They had effectively transformed what the Germans considered an unbreakable code into a solvable problem, demonstrating the extraordinary power of intellect, persistence, and ingenuity. The breakthrough was more than technical. It was symbolic. A small group of determined cryptologists working in a modest Warsaw office had achieved what major powers had deemed impossible. Rejewski's work, underpinned by rigorous mathematics and relentless experimentation, proved that human intellect could penetrate even the most sophisticated mechanical defenses. The implications for the coming war were profound, though few at the time fully appreciated them. As autumn approached, the team prepared to share their methods with military allies, recognizing that the full potential of their work would require collaboration. Little did they know that these early Polish breakthroughs would lay the foundation for the monumental code-breaking efforts at Bletchley Park and play a decisive role in the Allied victory years later. In the quiet intensity of that Warsaw office, Marian Rejewski had done the impossible. He had begun to crack Hitler's unbreakable code. Winter 1936, Warsaw, Poland. The cold seeped through the windows of the cipher bureau, but inside, the heat of intellectual labor burned relentlessly. Marian Rejewski hunched over a newly constructed Enigma replica, examining the arrangement of rotors and plug boards. Every gear, every electrical contact was meticulously aligned, for he understood that even the smallest misalignment could render weeks of calculations useless. Around him, Zygalski and Różycki prepared Zygalski sheets and catalogued permutation tables, the room cluttered with stacks of paper, notebooks, and mechanical components. The process was painstaking, requiring both mathematical precision and mechanical ingenuity. Rejewski often thought in layers: the rotor wirings, the daily key settings, the plugboard connections, all interacting to create billions of possible configurations. His mind mapped these permutations with a clarity that bordered on obsession, turning complex mechanical chaos into patterns that could be predicted, tested, and ultimately broken. Each successful decryption reinforced the principle that intellect could overcome technology, and that even Hitler's vaunted Enigma machine was not beyond human comprehension. As the months passed, the Cipher Bureau began to integrate these techniques into a systematic decryption workflow. Rejewski's replica machines allowed the cryptologist to simulate German message encryption and test candidate keys rapidly. This hands-on approach was critical. The theoretical calculations alone were insufficient without practical verification. Zygalski sheets, perforated to allow rapid cross-referencing of rotor positions, became an indispensable tool, while Różycki's meticulous logs tracked every attempted configuration, every partial solution, and every anomaly. The team's efforts were not without risk. Every intercepted message was time-sensitive. Delays could render intelligence obsolete. Rejewski and his colleagues often worked long into the night, fueled by coffee, determination, and a profound sense of responsibility. They knew that the knowledge gained from these messages had direct implications for national security, for the safety of Polish troops, and for the fragile stability of Europe in the face of growing German aggression. By early 1937, the Cipher Bureau had perfected a working system that could reliably decrypt Enigma messages under controlled conditions. The combination of Rejewski's mathematical brilliance, Zygalski's methodical perforated sheets, and Różycki's organizational rigor had transformed a theoretical solution into operational capability. They could anticipate German troop movements, decipher logistical instructions, and gain insights into strategic planning, all while maintaining absolute secrecy. Despite these successes, the team remained acutely aware that the Germans were constantly evolving their operational procedures. New rotor arrangements, daily key changes, and procedural modifications threatened to undermine their work. Rejewski responded with innovation, devising new techniques to track rotor wirings and develop card catalogues that link rotor permutations to message keys. Each advancement increased their efficiency and reduced the risk of failure, but the work demanded relentless focus and intellectual stamina. In Warsaw, the tension of the pre-war years was ever present. Political instability, military maneuvers along Poland's borders, and the looming threat of German expansion created a backdrop of urgency. Rejewski's team operated in secrecy, their achievements known only to a handful of trusted officers. The work of breaking Enigma was invisible to the outside world, yet its impact would resonate far beyond the walls of the Cipher Bureau. Shaping the course of World War II in ways few could imagine, the human element of this effort cannot be overstated. Each day demanded collaboration, patience, and trust. Rejewski's leadership combined intellectual vision with practical guidance, ensuring that the team remained focused and effective under extreme pressure. Zygalski and Różycki, equally dedicated, contributed not only technical expertise, but also creative problem-solving that allowed the Polish cryptologists to stay ahead of the evolving Enigma system. Together, they formed a unit whose synergy and determination would define the earliest successes against one of history's most complex ciphers. As 1937 drew to a close, the Cipher Bureau recognized that the system they had built was more than a tool. It was a framework for sustained intelligence gathering. Rejewski's early breakthroughs had created a foundation upon which the Allies could later build a massive code-breaking effort at Bletchley Park. The Polish cryptologist's work had transformed abstract mathematics into actionable intelligence, demonstrating the extraordinary power of human ingenuity in the face of seemingly insurmountable technological challenges. Summer 1938. Warsaw, Poland. The city buzzed with tension and uncertainty. News from Berlin carried ominous undertones as Hitler's ambitions became increasingly clear. While the world focused on diplomatic maneuvering and public posturing, Marian Rejewski and his colleagues remained in the shadows, poring over streams of encrypted German communications. Their office at Frascati Palace was filled with the low hum of machinery, the scratching of pencils on paper, and the occasional murmured calculation, a quiet symphony of intellect against the encroaching tide of war. The Polish Cipher Bureau had evolved into a tightly coordinated operation. Rejewski's Enigma replicas now included multiple rotor combinations, allowing the team to simulate an array of German configurations. Zygalski's sheets were organized into meticulous stacks, each representing a subset of possible rotor arrangements. Różycki maintained precise logs of every intercept, noting changes in German procedures, operator habits, and anomalies that could signal new encryption protocols. Every day brought fresh challenges, but the cryptologists met them with ingenuity, patience, and a disciplined rhythm. Rejewski understood that the true test was yet to come. Enigma operators were beginning to adopt more complex routines, including irregular message indicators and subtle variations in daily key usage. Each change, while minor in isolation, threatened to exponentially increase the difficulty of decryption. Yet Rejewski approached these challenges with characteristic clarity. "Every machine has rules," he told Zygalski one evening, "and every rule can be discovered. The Germans may change the details, but the system itself cannot escape logic." The tension extended beyond the walls of the office. Poland's military leadership was increasingly aware of the strategic value of the work being done in Warsaw. Lieutenant Colonel Guido Langer recognized that Enigma intelligence could provide early warnings of German military intentions, allowing Poland to prepare defenses, mobilize forces, and respond to threats with precision. Yet he also understood the fragility of their advantage. If the Germans discovered that their codes had been compromised, the consequences could be catastrophic. Operational security became paramount, and Rejewski's team operated under strict secrecy, even from some branches of the Polish government. In early September 1938, Rejewski made a crucial observation. By analysing subtle patterns in repeated message keys, he noted that German operators were inadvertently creating predictable sequences, a behaviour he would later call cipher idiosyncrasies. This insight allowed the team to refine their decryption techniques, reducing the time required to break individual messages and increasing the accuracy of their intelligence. It was a small but significant victory, achieved not with brute force, but through the careful application of logic and mathematical insight. Despite the pressure, the human dimension of the work remained critical. Rejewski, Zygalski, and Różycki relied on one another not only for technical collaboration, but also for morale. Long hours, minimal sleep, and the weight of national responsibility created a shared sense of purpose and camaraderie. Różycki, ever methodical, balanced precision with encouragement, ensuring that the team remained focused even as the storm clouds of war gathered over Europe. By the end of 1938, the Cipher Bureau had established a robust system capable of consistently breaking German Enigma messages. The Polish success was remarkable. A small team of mathematicians had penetrated what the German military considered an invincible code. Rejewski's combination of mathematical genius, mechanical insight, and relentless perseverance had made the impossible possible. The groundwork was laid, and while Europe moved ever closer to conflict, the Polish cryptologists quietly prepared to apply their methods in the trials that lay ahead. In the shadows of Warsaw, the calm before the storm was tangible. For Rejewski and his colleagues, every decrypted message, every confirmed rotor configuration, and every successful prediction of German military activity was a step toward a future in which knowledge, courage, and intellect could shape the fate of nations. They had cracked the code, yet the true test of their ingenuity, the onslaught of a world at war, was only just beginning. September 1st, Dansk, Poland. The distant rumble of artillery echoed across the city as German forces crossed the border. Airplanes roared overhead, dropping bombs on strategic positions, their engines slicing through the crisp morning air. In Warsaw, Marian Rejewski and his colleagues at the Cipher Bureau felt the tremors of history shaking the foundations of their nation. Their work, years in the making, had prepared them for this moment, not in the public eye, but in the silent, critical realm of intelligence. Rejewski's office became a command center of quiet determination. Intercepts flooded in from every direction. Orders from the German High Command, instructions to advancing units, and logistical communications detailing troop movements. With each message, Rejewski and his team applied their established decryption methods, translating strings of ciphered letters into actionable intelligence. Time was of the essence. Every decoded message carried the potential to save lives, to inform defensive maneuvers, and to provide the Polish military with precious hours to respond to the rapidly advancing Wehrmacht. Zygalski and Różycki worked tirelessly alongside Rejewski, managing the increasing volume of intercepts. The perforated Zygalski sheets were in constant use, allowing the cryptologist to narrow down possible rotor settings efficiently. Rejewski's replica Enigma machines facilitated immediate verification of decrypted keys, ensuring that every piece of intelligence was accurate before it reached military commanders. The room was a whirlwind of activity, pencils scratching against paper, the faint whirring of mechanical components, and the murmured calculations of mathematicians racing against an advancing enemy. Despite their expertise, the Polish cryptologists faced immense pressure. The Germans were altering their operational patterns, moving troops with precision and coordinating attacks with growing efficiency. Rejewski recognized that the work of years now had immediate life-or-death consequences. "We are no longer theorists," he told Zygalski during a tense moment. "Every decision we make here shapes the battlefield. Every delay could cost soldiers their lives." The first few days of the invasion were chaotic. German units bypassed fortifications, moved swiftly along undefended corridors, and leveraged combined arms tactics with devastating effect. Yet the Polish military, armed with intelligence gleaned from Rejewski's decryption efforts, managed to anticipate several German maneuvers, staging limited counteractions and strategic withdrawals. While these interventions could not halt the invasion, they bought critical time for civilian evacuations and the reorganization of military forces. By mid-September, the scale of the crisis became apparent. Warsaw faced encirclement, and the German advance threatened to sever communication lines. Rejewski and his team were forced to operate under the constant threat of air raids and advancing troops. The office of the Cipher Bureau, once a controlled environment of focused study, now resembled a war room, with the hum of urgency and the palpable weight of responsibility pressing on every decision. Amid the turmoil, Rejewski continued to innovate. German operators had increased the complexity of their Enigma procedures, introducing irregular message indicators and additional plugboard connections. Rejewski responded by refining the card catalogues and developing systematic approaches to compensate for the changes. Each successful decryption became a small triumph against the overwhelming force of the invading army. Each decoded message was a lifeline for Polish command structures struggling to coordinate resistance under fire. By late September, the inevitability of occupation loomed over Warsaw. Yet, even as the city faced imminent surrender, Rejewski and his colleagues took decisive action to preserve their work. Copies of their Zygalski sheets, card catalogues, and mathematical notes were hidden and transported in secret, ensuring that the legacy of their achievements would survive beyond the immediate conflicts. These precautions were not only acts of foresight, but of defiance, a testament to the enduring importance of intellect and preparation in the face of overwhelming adversity. As Warsaw fell and Polish forces were forced to retreat, the impact of Rejewski's work began to ripple outward. The intelligence gathered and preserved by the Cipher Bureau would soon become the foundation for Allied codebreaking efforts in France and Britain. The painstaking years of analysis, mechanical replication, and mathematical insight had not been in vain. Though the immediate battle was lost, the war of intellect was just beginning, and Marian Rejewski had ensured that the Allies would inherit a weapon of unprecedented strategic value: the ability to read Enigma encrypted communications. October 1939, Paris, France. The fall of Poland had sent shockwaves across Europe. Refugees crowded the train stations, carrying what little they could salvage from homes destroyed or abandoned. Among them, Marian Rejewski, Zygalski, and Różycki arrived under the auspices of the French and British military liaison officers, their mission clear: to preserve and transmit the secrets of Enigma decryption before German occupation could erase all traces. Inside a small, dimly lit office at the French Bureau de Chiffre, the Polish cryptologists unpacked crates containing Enigma replicas, Zygalski sheets, and meticulously organized card catalogues. Officers from the French WWII Bureau and representatives from British intelligence gathered around, curiosity mingled with awe. For the Allies, the Polish work was almost unbelievable. A few mathematicians had penetrated the supposedly unbreakable code of the German military. The implications were staggering, and everyone present recognized the urgency. Rejewski began demonstrations, carefully explaining the principles behind their methods. Using the Enigma replicas, he illustrated rotor movements, plugboard permutations, and the systematic approach that allowed them to deduce daily keys. Zygalski displayed the perforated sheets and explained how they drastically reduced the complexity of deciphering intercepted messages. Różycki detailed the organizational processes that allowed the team to manage the constant influx of German communications. Each explanation was precise, methodical, and yet underpinned by a profound simplicity. Logic could overcome even the most sophisticated encryption. The British representatives, including members of the Government Code and Cipher School, GC and CS, were stunned. They had already begun their own preliminary investigations into Enigma, but the Polish insights provided an enormous leap forward. Lieutenant Commander Alistair Denniston, head of GC and CS at Bletchley Park, took careful notes. understanding that the Polish breakthroughs could accelerate British efforts by years. For the first time, the Allies saw a path to cracking the Enigma cipher, a path built on mathematics, ingenuity, and meticulous experimentation. Over several weeks, Rejewski and his colleagues worked tirelessly, transferring knowledge to French and British officers. The sessions were intense. The volume of information was vast, and the stakes were monumental. Every explanation, every demonstration was framed not as a theoretical exercise, but as a strategic necessity. The Allied powers faced a formidable enemy, and the ability to intercept and decode German communications could shift the balance of power. Rejewski understood this implicitly. "It is not enough to know the system," he said quietly one evening. "We must ensure it can be applied. The lives of countless soldiers depend on it." The collaboration bore immediate fruit. The French and British officers quickly grasped the principles, and practical experiments began on-site. Enigma replicas were tested, Zygalski sheets analysed, and card catalogues consulted to validate the Polish methodology. Slowly, the Allies began to build the operational framework that would later become the backbone of Bletchley Park's monumental code-breaking efforts. The groundwork laid by Rejewski and his colleagues allowed for the creation of mechanized processes capable of handling the immense volume of messages that would flood in during the coming years of war. Beyond the technical transfer, the journey highlighted the human dimension of intelligence. Rejewski's calm demeanor under pressure, his unwavering commitment to accuracy, and his methodical explanation of complex ideas left a lasting impression on those present. Zygalski and Różycki's contributions reinforced the importance of teamwork, meticulous record-keeping, and adaptability. The Allies had inherited not only methods, but a model of disciplined, collaborative problem-solving under extreme conditions. By the end of 1939, the Polish cryptologists had returned to France and subsequently dispersed across Allied territories, ensuring their safety and the preservation of their work. The knowledge they had transferred would become instrumental in intercepting German communications, informing operational decisions, and ultimately saving countless lives across multiple theatres of war. Without this early Polish breakthrough, the monumental successes of Bletchley Park in 1940 and beyond, the ability to anticipate U-boat movements, coordinate air campaigns, and protect convoys, might have been delayed by years. Marian Rejewski's single-minded dedication had done more than crack a code. It had forged a bridge between intelligence, mathematics, and strategy, linking the quiet offices of Warsaw to the vast machinery of Allied operations. In the unfolding global conflict, the seeds sown by Rejewski, Zygalski, and Różycki would blossom into one of the most decisive instruments of victory in modern warfare, proving that courage, intellect, and collaboration could achieve the impossible. Early 1940, Bletchley Park, England. The English countryside was quiet, deceptively so, as the sprawling manor house of Bletchley Park hummed with clandestine activity. Across the halls, rooms had been converted into nerve centres of intelligence, filled with mathematicians, linguists, engineers and clerks, all tasked with one goal: to break the codes of the German military. Into this environment arrived the knowledge carried by Marian Rejewski, Zygalski, and Różycki, the insights painstakingly acquired in Warsaw and transmitted to the Allies in the chaos following Poland's collapse. Rejewski's work became the foundation upon which the British built their operational systems. The Enigma replicas, the Zygalski sheets, and the card catalogues provided by the Polish cryptologists offered a crucial head start. Without them, Bletchley Park would have faced the monumental task of decoding Enigma from scratch, a challenge that could have taken years, during which countless military operations would have proceeded under complete German secrecy. The British mathematicians, including Alan Turing and Gordon Welchman, quickly recognized the significance of this contribution, translating Polish methods into mechanized processes that would ultimately become the famed bomb machines. The process was painstaking and intellectually demanding. Each intercepted message required meticulous cross-checking of rotor settings, plugboard permutations, and daily key changes. The work combined abstract mathematical reasoning with mechanical replication, testing every hypothesis against live German communications. Rejewski's early insights had demonstrated that the Enigma system, despite its complexity, was vulnerable to systematic analysis, a revelation that allowed the British to approach the problem with confidence and structure. Within months, the speed and accuracy of decryption improved dramatically. Messages that once would have taken weeks to analyze could now be decoded in a matter of hours. Military commanders began to receive actionable intelligence, enabling preemptive strategies against German naval movements, troop deployments, and air raids. The impact was immediate. Convoy routes could be adjusted to avoid U-boot wolf packs, air defense positions optimized, and operational plans informed by insights that the enemy could not suspect were compromised. The significance of the Polish contribution extended beyond technical methods. Rejewski's meticulous approach to record-keeping, systematic problem-solving, and adaptability under pressure became a model for Bletchley Park's operations. His insistence on verifying every calculation, documenting every assumption, and continuously testing mechanical replicas provided a disciplined framework that allowed the British cryptanalysts to scale the effort dramatically. The combination of Polish ingenuity and British engineering excellence created an unprecedented intelligence capability, one that would prove decisive in the Battle of the Atlantic, the North African campaigns, and the broader European theatre. Yet the work was not without its pressures and dangers. Each day brought new German encryption protocols, operational changes, and the ever-present threat of error. One miscalculation could render a decoded message useless, or worse, alert the Germans to the compromise of Enigma. The tension was compounded by the secrecy required. Only a select few knew the source of the breakthrough. For the Allies, the Polish cryptologist's anonymity was a strategic necessity, shielding both the methods and the lives of those involved. As 1940 progressed, Rejewski's contribution became increasingly critical. The German invasion of France, the Battle of Britain, and the intensifying U-boat threat in the Atlantic all demanded rapid and reliable intelligence. Enigma decryption, once a theoretical exercise in mathematics, had become an operational lifeline. Decisions that could alter the course of the war depended on the clarity, speed, and accuracy of insights derived from the work of a few dedicated mathematicians, whose understanding of mechanical ciphers had outstripped even the technological prowess of the German military. Rejewski, far from Warsaw, continued to refine his techniques, consulting with Allied cryptographers and providing guidance on adapting Polish methods to evolving German practices. The transmission of knowledge was iterative. Each success in decryption informed further refinements in approach. The collaborative efforts of Polish and British cryptologists represented one of the earliest examples of international scientific cooperation under the extreme pressure of war, demonstrating that intellect, discipline, and shared purpose could produce results that no single nation could achieve alone. By the summer of 1940, the Enigma cipher had been rendered vulnerable in operational terms, thanks to the foundational work of Rejewski and his colleagues. The Allies, armed with unprecedented access to German communications, gained a strategic advantage that would shape the trajectory of World War II. From Warsaw to Bletchley Park, from clandestine offices to the decks of convoys in the Atlantic, the ripple effects of Polish ingenuity were being felt across the theatre of war. Autumn 1940, the Atlantic Ocean. The roar of diesel engines and the slap of waves against convoy hulls filled the night air. British merchant ships, laden with critical supplies, moved cautiously across waters patrolled by lurking German U-boats. Below deck and in cramped signal rooms, officers relied on intercepts provided through the intelligence chain that traced directly back to the Polish breakthroughs. Every decoded Enigma message was a potential lifesaver, a chance to reroute ships away from imminent danger. Meanwhile, at Bletchley Park, cryptologists monitored the flow of intercepted German communications with intense focus. Rejewski's methods had been fully integrated into the operation, allowing teams to rapidly determine rotor settings, plugboard configurations, and message keys. The sheer volume of messages was staggering. Yet the combination of mathematical insight, mechanical innovation, and disciplined workflow allowed the Allies to anticipate U-boat movements, convoy attacks, and even logistical operations with remarkable accuracy. Captain Charles Fraser, commanding a North Atlantic convoy escort, leaned over a chart table illuminated by dim lantern light. "Signals from Bletchley indicate a wolf pack forming off the coast of Ireland," he muttered, tracing the predicted positions with a gloved finger. He adjusted the convoy's route accordingly, avoiding a direct encounter with the German submarines. Every decision was informed by intelligence made possible by Rejewski's work years earlier in Warsaw. A reminder that the chain from mathematics to the battlefield could be both subtle and decisive. In North Africa, similar impacts were unfolding. Allied forces faced Rommel's Afrika Korps, whose rapid mechanized maneuvers had initially outpaced British defenses. However, decoded Enigma messages allowed commanders to anticipate troop movements, resupply routes, and strategic objectives. Battles were fought not only with tanks and rifles, but with knowledge, an invisible force that allowed a numerically inferior army to make informed decisions, striking where the enemy was weakest and avoiding traps carefully laid by German planners. Back in England, Bletchley Park's atmosphere was a mixture of exhilaration and exhaustion. Cryptologists worked in shifts, poring over Enigma traffic that stretched across multiple theatres of war. Rejewski's contributions continued to underpin operational decisions, though few outside the intelligence community were aware of the source. The success of Allied operations depended not only on the speed of decryption, but on the meticulous verification of every output. An error could be catastrophic, potentially revealing to the Germans that their supposedly unbreakable code had been compromised. Despite the intensity, morale remained remarkably high. The knowledge that their work saved lives and influenced major strategic decisions provided motivation that surpassed fatigue. The legacy of Polish cryptologists infused the operation with a sense of history and purpose. Decades of mathematical insight, careful experimentation, and relentless perseverance were now bearing fruit on a global stage. The young mathematicians and linguists at Bletchley Park became heirs to the methods of Rejewski, Zygalski, and Różycki, applying their techniques under wartime pressure with remarkable fidelity and creativity. By early 1941, the impact of Enigma intelligence was becoming evident. The Battle of the Atlantic began to shift in favor of the Allies as convoys successfully navigated treacherous waters. U-boat attacks were anticipated and mitigated, and critical supplies reached Britain in greater volumes. On the Eastern Front, when the Germans launched Operation Barbarossa the following year, the ability to anticipate troop movements and logistical decisions allowed Soviet commanders to respond with a degree of foresight that, while limited, proved invaluable in early engagements. Rejewski, now operating in exile from France and later Britain, continued to advise on adapting Polish methods to evolving German practices. Each German modification to the Enigma system, whether a new rotor, altered message indicators, or revised plugboard connections, was met with a corresponding innovation in Allied procedures. The dynamic interplay between cryptographers and the enemy's encryption specialists became a high-stakes intellectual contest, one in which Rejewski's early breakthroughs provided a crucial advantage. In retrospect, the role of Polish cryptology in shaping the course of World War II cannot be overstated. A few mathematicians in Warsaw, working quietly in a modest office, had cracked a code considered impossible to break. Their insights propagated through France, Britain, and eventually across every theatre of war, informing operational decisions that saved countless lives and contributed decisively to the Allied victory. Knowledge, skill, and perseverance had turned the tide, demonstrating the extraordinary power of human intellect against seemingly insurmountable technological challenges. Spring 1942, Berlin, Germany. High-ranking officers of the Kriegsmarine gathered in a dimly lit briefing room, their faces etched with concern. Reports from U-boat commanders had become increasingly alarming. Convoys that should have been easy targets were evading destruction, and intelligence regarding Allied maneuvers seemed to anticipate German tactics with uncanny accuracy. Despite the stringent secrecy of the Enigma system, a chilling realization began to dawn on some in the German command. The Allies might have found a way to penetrate their communications. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, maintained a rigid facade, but privately he was troubled. U-boat patrols reported near misses, losses in unexpected locations, and sudden Allied evasive maneuvers. Investigations were launched, security measures tightened, and procedural protocols revised, but the failures persisted. Some officers began whispering about the possibility that the code they considered invincible had been compromised, though the full scale of ultra-intelligence remained unknown even to the highest echelons of the German military. Meanwhile, the Allies, empowered by the insights passed down from Rejewski and his Polish colleagues, continued to exploit the vulnerability. U-boat movements were monitored, convoys rerouted, and counter-offensives executed with surgical precision. Intelligence derived from decrypted Enigma messages provided a strategic advantage that extended across the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and into North Africa. Every operational decision, from the deployment of escort ships to the timing of air reconnaissance, was informed by the invisible hand of codebreaking. Back in Bletchley Park, the sense of urgency remained palpable. Messages were intercepted around the clock, analysed and verified. Cryptologists monitored German procedural changes, adapting techniques to maintain the flow of intelligence. Rejewski's early insights into rotor wiring, permutation cycles, and plugboard interactions remained foundational, providing a framework for ongoing adaptations. The interplay between evolving German encryption methods and Allied decryption strategies became a complex, high-stakes chess game played out across multiple theatres of war. The psychological impact on German officers was subtle but profound. Confidence in Enigma had been a cornerstone of operational planning, a symbol of technological supremacy. The possibility that messages were being read by the enemy undermined morale, sowed distrust, and forced command decisions to incorporate an unquantifiable degree of uncertainty. Yet the true extent of the compromise remained hidden. The Germans never realized the full penetration of Ultra, and the secrecy surrounding Allied code-breaking operations preserved the strategic advantage for years. As 1942 progressed, the operational results were undeniable. U-boat losses mounted, convoy protection improved, and Allied forces began to seize the initiative across multiple fronts. Decisions informed by decrypted intelligence allowed the Allies to exploit weaknesses, anticipate attacks, and concentrate resources effectively. Rejewski's work, once confined to a small office in Warsaw, now exerted influence on global naval operations, shifting the balance in a conflict of unprecedented scale. For the Polish cryptologists themselves, the news from Berlin was both vindicating and sobering. Their early breakthroughs had altered the course of the war, yet they remained in exile, largely unrecognized publicly, and acutely aware of the risks faced by those still under occupation. The knowledge they had preserved and transmitted had become a weapon of extraordinary power, yet the human cost of the conflict continued to mount across Europe. Their intellectual victory coexisted with the devastating realities of occupation, bombing campaigns, and battlefield losses. By late 1942, it was clear that the combination of Polish ingenuity and Allied operational discipline had created a turning point in the war. The Germans continued to revise procedures, but the intelligence advantage remained firmly with the Allies. Rejewski's methods, combined with the scale and resources of Bletchley Park, ensured that even the most sophisticated changes in Enigma operation could be anticipated and countered. The invisible struggle between mathematicians and military strategists had become a decisive factor in the global conflict, illustrating that human intellect, applied with rigor and persistence, could rival even the most formidable technologies of the era. Summer 1943, London, England. The air was thick with anticipation and the distant hum of wartime industry. Victory, though far from assured, seemed increasingly possible, and the tireless work of countless individuals behind the front lines had begun to tip the scales. Among them, Marian Rejewski, Zygalski, and Różycki remained largely unknown to the public, their names absent from headlines and official commemorations. Yet their contributions were monumental. The intellectual breakthrough that allowed the Allies to read Enigma messages had transformed the dynamics of the war, saving lives and guiding strategic decisions across multiple theatres. In the corridors of Bletchley Park, the cryptologists continued to work, now in a highly organised, mechanised system powered by bomba machines, able to handle the massive influx of intercepted messages from the Luftwaffe, Kriegsmarine, and Wehrmacht. Rejewski's foundational work ensured that these systems operated with unparalleled efficiency. Each rotor setting, each plugboard configuration, each intercepted message traced its lineage back to the quiet rooms of Warsaw where a few determined mathematicians had defied the impossible. The impact extended far beyond technical achievement. The Polish cryptologist's success had reshaped the nature of intelligence in modern warfare. No longer were frontline engagements solely dictated by numbers, artillery, or terrain. Information itself had become a weapon. Convoys in the Atlantic could be rerouted, U-boat positions anticipated, and air campaigns coordinated with a level of precision previously unimaginable. Every operational advantage gained through ultra-intelligence was a testament to years of disciplined study, mathematical insight, and the courage to act on knowledge that was, at the time, unrecognized and unheralded. Rejewski himself reflected on the journey with quiet humility. The recognition, when it came decades later, could not erase the memory of years spent in exile, the stress of wartime uncertainty, or the knowledge of compatriots still under occupation. Yet he took pride in the undeniable reality that the work he had begun in Warsaw had become a decisive factor in the Allied war effort. His methods, refined and expanded upon by British colleagues, had saved countless lives and contributed to turning the tide against Nazi Germany. The legacy of this achievement was multidimensional. On a practical level, it demonstrated that even the most complex technological systems could be understood and penetrated through human intellect. On a strategic level, it highlighted the importance of foresight, preparation, and the integration of knowledge across national boundaries. And on a human level, it underscored the profound impact that a few determined individuals, operating with courage, collaboration, and insight, could have on the course of history. By 1945, the war in Europe drew to a close, and the full extent of Allied intelligence operations remained a closely guarded secret. The contributions of Rejewski, Zygalski, and Różycki, while eventually acknowledged in historical accounts, were initially invisible, their brilliance concealed behind the veil of wartime secrecy. Yet for those who had benefited from their work, commanders, soldiers, and civilians alike, the effects were tangible. Convoys reached their destinations, offensives were strategically timed, and countless lives were spared. Marian Rejewski's story, emblematic of the unsung heroes of intelligence, stands as a testament to the power of intellect and perseverance. A single mind, supported by collaboration and driven by determination, had done what was once considered impossible, cracking Hitler's unbreakable code. The ripples of that achievement spread across oceans and continents, influencing the course of battles, the fate of nations, and the ultimate outcome of the greatest conflict in human history. As history would come to show, the victory over Enigma was not just a triumph of mathematics or mechanics. It was a triumph of human ingenuity, courage, and the unwavering belief that even the most formidable challenges could be overcome. In the shadows of Warsaw, in the offices of Bletchley Park, and across the theatres of World War II, the silent work of Rejewski and his colleagues had forever changed the nature of warfare and cemented their place among history's most extraordinary minds.